My boyfriend took his ex on the romantic vacation I had saved up for over 2 years. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I just disappeared, taking with me the key to a secret that could ruin him. He thought I was just a clingy girlfriend. But when the hotel staff called me Madam Chairwoman, his world shattered. I had been planning the vacation for almost 2 years. I had created a secret folder filled with resort options, travel guides, restaurants, and handwritten notes of all the places Ethan once said he'd love to see. I wanted it to be a birthday surprise, something unforgettable. I even took on extra freelance work and skipped weekends out just to make it happen. I thought I was building a memory for us. I didn't know I was just building a luxury trip for 2 people, one of whom wasn't me. Ethan had always said he hated surprises, so I didn't tell him until a week before the trip. I watched his face light up as I gave him the envelope with the booking. "You did this for me?" he asked, looking shocked. I nodded, smiling like a fool, thinking I had done something special. He hugged me and said it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for him. Then, 3 days before the trip, he suddenly said he couldn't go. He said something urgent had come up. Naturally, I asked questions. He got irritated, accused me of being controlling, and I apologized like always. He told me to go alone, but the way he said it felt like a dare, not a suggestion. I quietly canceled my leave and told him I understood. I even packed up the little gift bag I'd made for him, sunscreen, travel-sized cologne, and a handwritten note with our inside jokes. I left it on his desk. The day of the vacation arrived. I stayed home, still trying to convince myself that maybe he really did have a work emergency. I told myself not to check my phone, but I did. And that's when everything broke. Her name was Mia, his ex, the one he swore was long gone and nothing serious, the one who cheated on him back in college. Her story appeared on my feed, 2 glasses of wine, sunset in the background, and the unmistakable view of the exact resort I had booked. The caption said, "When he surprises you with your dream vacation," with a smiling face and a heart palm tree emoji. #blessed. My stomach dropped. I looked again. The palm trees, the room's ocean view, the damn towels with the embroidered initials I had requested. He had taken her first. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she booked it separately. Maybe he didn't even know. But the next photo showed him shirtless, arm around her, grinning. The next was a boomerang of them laughing in the poolside bar, the one I had called weeks ago to request his favorite drink be prepared. Everything I had planned was being used by someone else. I felt sick. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped. I turned off my phone and sat in silence for hours. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the booking system. I had made all the arrangements through my business account, which he didn't know I had. The resort, the dinner reservations, even the airport pickup, everything was under my name. I canceled the pre-authorized card and removed his name from the reservation notes. I didn't do anything loud or messy. I didn't post, call, or send angry texts. Instead, I packed a small bag. I wrote a simple note and left it on our shared dresser. "Don't worry about the rent this month. I won't be staying here anymore." I didn't even take all my things, just the essentials, laptop, clothes, ID, and my dignity. I walked out of that apartment like I was going to the store and never turned back. For 3 days, I stayed in a hotel under a different name. I didn't contact anyone. I kept my phone on airplane mode. I drank hotel coffee, took long showers, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about all the times he made me feel small. All the moments I brushed off, like when he said I was too sensitive or trying too hard, like when he forgot our anniversary but remembered the exact date Mia had broken his heart. I remembered once asking him what he'd do if he ever saw her again. He said, "I'd walk away and thank God you were in my life instead." What a liar. By the 4th day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on, expecting chaos. There were a few texts. One said, "Hey, hope you're okay. Me and Mia are at the resort." Weirdest thing. My car didn't work. Another said, "Are you mad? You're being dramatic." And the last one just said, "Call me." I didn't reply. What was there to say? He had made his choice. I didn't need to fight for attention anymore. I had always been the one who planned, who gave, who fixed things when they went wrong. He had been the one who received, who took, who made promises with no real meaning behind them. Now, he had taken the one thing I had left, my dream trip, and handed it to the one person he once swore he'd never go back to. It was in that quiet room, surrounded by white walls and the scent of hotel shampoo, that I made a new decision. I opened an old email I had ignored for months, a job offer from a luxury hotel chain overseas. It was a management position, temporary at first, but with room to grow. I had said no at the time because Ethan didn't want me to abandon our future. But now there was nothing left to abandon. So I clicked reply and wrote, "I'm interested. When can I start?" They replied within hours. Apparently, the previous manager had stepped down early, and they needed someone to start as soon as possible. All expenses paid, temporary housing included. I could choose any of the chain's locations to begin training. I smiled for the first time in days. I chose the one in Bali, the same island where Ethan was currently enjoying the last bits of the trip I had built for us. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, my space. I didn't need to confront him to win. I didn't need to humiliate him. I had already won the moment I decided to stop giving him any more of my energy. Still, a part of me wondered how he would react when he realized the truth, that the woman he thought was quiet, harmless, and naive had been the one holding all the cards. That the hotel staff bowed when they saw me. That the suite he slept in was upgraded on my request. That the wine he toasted with Mia had been selected from a list I had curated. I didn't hate him. That would have taken too much of my time. I simply erased him like a typo in a long letter. A week later, I boarded the flight. New number, new job, new apartment waiting for me. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and whispered a thank you to the version of me that finally chose herself. Somewhere on that island, Ethan was probably still wondering why the staff no longer answered his calls. But that wasn't my concern anymore because I wasn't just the girl who planned the trip. I was the woman who owned the resort. I didn't post anything online. I didn't update my status. I didn't drop hints or leave vague quotes about heartbreak. I just disappeared. People noticed, though. A couple of friends texted me asking if everything was okay. I gave short answers. I didn't feel like explaining. It wasn't their fault, and it wasn't their mess to clean up. Most of them knew Ethan as the funny guy, the smooth talker, the one who bought roses on random days. They didn't know about the cold silences, the emotional pressure, or the way he made me feel invisible whenever Mia was even mentioned. He had once told me I was overthinking things, that Mia was just a chapter long closed. I had wanted to believe him so badly that I forced myself to forget the way he paused whenever she came up. How he still had a playlist she made for him. How he kept their old photos in a hidden folder he thought I didn't know about. I had pretended not to care because I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, I'd break something I couldn't fix. Turns out it was already broken. I was just the last to know. I moved into a temporary apartment provided by the hotel company. It was smaller than what I was used to, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, mine. The view from the window showed the beach and the distant waves crashing into the shore. There was something peaceful about starting over in a place where no one knew my name. Well, almost no one. The regional director of the hotel chain, Mr. Tanaka, had been following my work for a while. I had done some consulting under a different name before, helping smaller resorts revamp their operations. It was supposed to be freelance, temporary, low-key. But Mr. Tanaka had somehow figured out my full background. He knew who my parents were and what company I came from. He was respectful about it. "You're more than just a legacy," he said during our first meeting. "You have a sharp mind and a good instinct for people. That's something you can't inherit." That compliment stayed with me longer than I expected. I had gotten used to being praised for being nice, for being supportive, for being chill. No one had ever complimented my instincts before. As part of my job, I had to do a full audit of the resort I selected as my starting location. It was the very same one Ethan and Mia had gone to, though they had checked out 2 days before I arrived. I didn't plan it that way, but I won't pretend I didn't feel relieved. I didn't want to see them. Not yet. Not ever if I could help it. Still, their presence lingered in the walls. Staff remembered them. One of the front desk women, Taika, quietly asked me if I knew the loud couple from Suite 5C. I smiled and said no. She described Mia as demanding but fake, and Ethan as charming but suspicious. I let her talk. She didn't know I was the one who booked that suite. She didn't know the reservation had originally been for a romantic couples massage, a custom candlelit dinner, and a sunrise breakfast on the private balcony. All of which Mia had enjoyed. Not anymore. I redirected those experiences to other guests, newlyweds, parents on anniversary trips, a widow on her first solo vacation. Watching their faces light up brought me a quiet satisfaction I couldn't describe. I had poured my heart into those details, and now they were going to people who appreciated them. At night, I walked along the beach alone. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. My mind would sometimes wander to Ethan, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt embarrassment. I had given so much to someone who had offered me so little in return. I had shrunk myself, ignored red flags, and hoped that if I just gave more, loved harder, he would stay. Now I understood something deeply important. Staying isn't love. Choosing you when no one is watching, that's love. He never chose me. Not once. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. My notebook quickly filled with sharp thoughts, memories, and short letters I'd never send. Some were to Ethan, some to myself, and some to the version of me that had allowed so much nonsense in the name of love. One night, while reviewing staff training footage, I saw a brief clip that made my stomach tighten. It was a recording from the pool area during the week Ethan and Mia had stayed. He was laughing, drink in hand, as Mia clung to his side like a vine. He looked happy. He looked free. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see more. But the next morning, there was an email waiting in my inbox. No subject line, no greeting, just a single sentence. Why didn't you tell me it was yours? It was from Ethan. I stared at the screen for a while. He knew it was a short message, but it told me everything. Someone must have told him. Maybe the staff connected the dots. Maybe he overheard a conversation. Either way, it didn't matter now. He had taken me for granted. That was the truth. Whether he knew who I was or not didn't change the fact that he had betrayed me. He had lied, and I had left. I didn't reply. Another message came that afternoon. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I messed up. Then another. Mia meant nothing. It was a mistake. You're the only one I ever really loved. The messages kept coming. Apologies, excuses, confusion. At one point, he said he didn't even know why he took her, that he was drunk, lonely, and thought she was just easy company. He said he missed me, that everything reminded him of me, that he felt like a fool. I still didn't reply. Some things don't deserve answers. A week later, he sent one last message. I'll wait. Please talk to me when you're ready. Ready for what? To forgive. To explain why I walked away. To let him back in. I wasn't angry anymore, but I had no space left for him. He had been given chance after chance. I had chosen him again and again, and when it was time for him to choose me, he picked someone else. That kind of decision doesn't need a second look. I told the staff to block his number from the resort's line. I didn't want his name coming up in any guest interactions again. It wasn't long before people started noticing my work. Guests left glowing reviews. Corporate reached out to praise my management. They asked if I'd consider staying longer, maybe taking on more responsibility. I said yes. A few days later, I got a call from Mr. Tanaka. We're having a shareholder meeting next month, he said. We'd love it if you could attend and speak. They're all very curious about the youngest woman to ever run one of our properties. I paused. Shareholder meeting. That would mean my name, my background, everything would be fully public. I had avoided the press so far, choosing to work quietly. But maybe it was time. Yes, I said. I'll be there. There was no more reason to hide. If Ethan hadn't recognized what he had when I was just Leah, the hardworking girlfriend, maybe he'd understand now that I was Leah Bennett, the woman who owned the very space he used to lie to me. That night, I took myself to dinner at the resort's most expensive restaurant. I wore a black dress, heels, and a calm expression. Alone. A staff member brought me a bottle of wine and smiled. Congratulations on your first month here, Madam Chairwoman, she said. I smiled back. Thank you. I wasn't anyone's girlfriend now. I was the woman who disappeared, and I was just getting started. The shareholder meeting took place in Singapore at one of our flagship properties. I arrived in a fitted white suit, hair tied back, and heels that clicked like punctuation on marble floors. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to feel sharp, like someone who had nothing to prove anymore. The boardroom was filled with mostly older men in expensive suits, a few women in tailored dresses, and a handful of younger department heads. Some smiled politely, some looked curious, and a few looked surprised. Most of them had only seen my name in internal reports. They didn't expect someone so young to be leading one of their top resorts. I gave a short presentation on how I had increased guest satisfaction, lowered refund rates, and introduced a new training model for staff. I mentioned the charity vacation packages and how they had gone viral thanks to a military couple's emotional honeymoon story. What I didn't mention was that the suite given to that couple had originally been reserved for my ex-boyfriend and his ex-girlfriend. That part was for me alone. After the meeting, I shook hands, answered questions, smiled at the compliments, and walked out feeling lighter. For the first time, I felt seen for something other than being someone's partner, not as someone's daughter or someone's quiet girlfriend. 2 days later, I flew back to the island resort. The staff greeted me with warm smiles and fresh flowers. It felt like home. What I didn't expect was the front desk manager, Taika, pulling me aside quietly after my return. "There's a guest asking for you," she said, lowering her voice. "He's been here for hours. No reservation. He said he's willing to wait as long as it takes." I knew who it was before she said his name. Ethan. I took a slow breath. "Did he say why he's here?" Taika nodded. "He said he wanted to apologize like he hasn't slept in days." Part of me wanted to ignore it, but something inside me whispered that this moment had to happen. Not for closure, not for him, but for me. I told Taika to send him to the private garden lounge. I didn't want him anywhere near the guest spaces. When I walked in, I found him sitting on the edge of a wicker couch, head in hands. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. His face was thinner, eyes red, beard uneven, like he'd been shaving without caring. He stood up immediately. "Leah, I didn't say anything." "I didn't know," he said quickly. "Not until after when the staff started calling you Madam Chairwoman. When I saw your last name on the newsletter, I didn't know you were the one who booked your vacation." I interrupted calmly. "Would it have mattered?" He swallowed. "Would you have stayed if you'd known whose money paid for that ocean view?" He opened his mouth, then shut it again. "I didn't come to argue," he said. "Good," I said, sitting across from him. "Because I'm not here to explain." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I messed up. I know I did. You didn't deserve that. What I did with Mia. It wasn't planned. It was stupid." He reached out and I guess I was curious. Curious. That word stung more than I expected. Like I had been nothing more than a placeholder while he scratched an old itch. "You cheated," I said plainly. "You took something meant for us and gave it to her." He rubbed his face. "I don't even know why. You were always there, always kind, always trying. I think I didn't feel like I deserved it. You were doing everything and I was coasting. I didn't think you'd ever leave. There was the root of it. You never thought I'd leave. I had made it too easy. I had always forgiven, always fixed. I had made myself smaller so he could feel like a man. I stood. You're not a villain, Ethan. You're just not the hero of my story anymore." His eyes welled up. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said. "You're not worth that kind of emotion." He flinched. "I deserve that." I nodded. "You do." "I just needed to say I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I lost something real. I didn't even know what I had until it was gone." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small red velvet box. "I bought this before I came. I thought maybe." I didn't let him finish. "You don't get to propose after destroying what we had," I said. "And I'm not the same woman you walked away from." He looked at the ring like it was a dead thing. It's too late, isn't it? I nodded. He stood too. Is there anything I can do to fix it? You can walk away, I said gently. With what little dignity you have left. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he nodded. Goodbye, Leah. I watched him walk out, no dramatic music, no begging, just silence. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but all I felt was peace. Later that night, I sat by the pool with a glass of wine. Taika joined me with a smirk. So, that was the mystery man. I smiled. That chapter's closed. She raised her glass. Here's to new chapters. We clinked glasses. I didn't tell her the best part. The next morning, Mia arrived. She walked through the lobby in a tight dress and designer sunglasses, carrying a fake smile and too much perfume. I was in the garden reviewing documents when Taika came running. She's here, she whispered. Send her to the executive office, I said. A few minutes later, Mia stood in front of me, clearly rehearsed. I'm not here to fight, she began. I thought you should know Ethan has been miserable. He hasn't eaten. He's been crying. He talks about you every day. I'm not surprised, I said. She blinked. I know I messed up. I didn't know the trip was yours. He told me it was a surprise he planned. I had no idea. And when you found out, I asked. She hesitated. Felt messy. I thought maybe it would pass. I didn't think he'd leave you. He didn't leave me. I left him, I said. She looked away. I'm not here to compete with you, Mia. I don't want him back. She looked surprised. He's not a prize, I added. And if he were, he'd be the kind that breaks in your hands. Her jaw tightened. You think you're better than me? No, I said. I know I'm better for myself. She stormed out, muttering something under her breath. I let her go. After that, I had the locks on the executive level changed. I didn't want any more surprise visitors. By the end of the week, Ethan and Mia had left the island for good. No messages, no calls, just absence, and that was enough. The air felt cleaner after they were gone. The staff worked with more energy. The resort felt brighter, lighter, like a weight had lifted. One evening, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse suite, looking at the stars. I thought about who I had become. Not someone angry, not someone broken, but someone whole. And I knew deep down this was just the beginning. It was supposed to be a regular morning. I had planned to review inventory reports and prepare a staff reward rotation. But just after breakfast, Taika entered my office with wide eyes and a half grin. You're not going to believe who just booked the presidential suite, she said. I didn't respond right away. Something about her voice told me the universe wasn't done with me yet. She placed a printed reservation slip on my desk. Guest, Ethan Wells +1, Amelia Shore. I stared at the paper for a long moment. He came back. After all of that, the lies, the trip, the public humiliation, he had the nerve to return to my resort. And worse, he brought her. Taika waited like she expected me to burst into anger or laughter or maybe throw something across the room, but I simply leaned back in my chair. Let him check in, I said. Give him everything he asked for. She blinked. Everything? I nodded. Everything, but make sure he pays full price. No discounts, no perks. And when the staff refers to me, they'll call me Madam Bennett. No more first name mentions. A slow smile spread across her face. You're planning something. I looked out the window where the ocean kissed the edge of the sky. I'm just letting the story finish itself. That afternoon, I reviewed every single service tied to the presidential suite. The spa treatment was upgraded to a couples session with awkwardly romantic background music. The chef's table dinner was reserved under Mr. and Mrs. Wells because they certainly looked like they wanted to play house. But the best part, the welcome note. I rewrote it myself to Mr. Wells and guest. We hope you enjoy the views, the silence, and the time to reflect on what really matters. Management. They checked in at 3 p.m. sharp. I didn't go to the lobby. I didn't watch the cameras. Instead, I sent the newest intern, a shy girl named Anna, to escort them upstairs. It would be a good training experience, I said. Ethan wouldn't recognize her, but I made sure she was wearing a pin with our hotel's Latin motto etched in gold, Veritatis post tenebris. Truth after darkness. Hours passed without incident. It was quiet, almost boring, until evening. Just after 6 p.m., Ethan's name appeared on the staff line, requesting a special seating at the beach deck restaurant. Anna answered politely and informed him the deck was fully booked. He insisted. She declined again. Then came the second call, this time to the general manager. He asked for me. The GM passed the message to me in a text. Mr. Wells says it's urgent. He wants to speak to the owner directly. I replied simply, tell him the owner doesn't take calls after hours. 20 minutes later, I received a knock at my office door. It was Anna again. Sorry, Madam Bennett, she said. He came downstairs. He's in the lobby asking where you are. I stood slowly, straightened my blouse, and picked up my room key. Send him to the solarium. That room had glass walls, soft lighting, and no cameras. I didn't want our staff involved in what was about to happen. When I walked into the solarium, he was already pacing. He turned at the sound of my heels and stopped like he'd seen a ghost. He looked the same, but older somehow, like time had started dragging its nails across his face. Mia wasn't with him. Maybe she stayed in the suite. Or maybe she'd finally realized she wasn't the main character in this story. Leo, he said. It's Madam Bennett, I corrected. He blinked. Right. Sorry. I didn't think you'd actually come. Then you shouldn't have booked a room in my house, I said flatly. He exhaled. Look, I know what you must think, but I didn't come to stir up drama. Mia planned this. She thought it would be symbolic or some crap. I didn't even know this was your resort until she told me at the airport. And yet, I said, walking past him to pour myself water. You still boarded the flight, checked into the room, ordered wine, called the front desk to demand special treatment. All under a name you had no right to carry. He frowned. That's not fair. I didn't mean for it to be this way. You keep saying that, I interrupted. You didn't mean to take the trip. You didn't mean to hurt me. You didn't mean to cheat. You didn't mean to come back. But here you are, like a stain that won't wash out. He ran a hand through his hair. Can't we just talk, please? One real conversation. No titles. No hotel walls between us. Just us. There is no us, I said. His shoulders sagged. You left me. I did, I said. And then I stopped. He looked down like those words physically hit him. Was it really that easy for you? He asked. No, I said softly. It was hard. It was painful. It was humiliating. But the moment I saw you with her, laughing like I'd never existed, it became very easy to choose myself. He stepped closer. I didn't laugh because I was happy. I laughed because I was trying to forget how much I'd messed up. I held up my hand. Don't rewrite history. You enjoyed that trip. I planned it for love. You used it to relive a lie. There was silence between us. Then he said something I didn't expect. She's pregnant. I blinked. She told me this morning, he added. I'm still processing it. Thought. I don't know. I thought you should know. I stared at him for a long time. Then I laughed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't mean. It was just funny. He looked confused. You think it's funny? I said, because now you get to raise a child with the woman you replaced me with, and I get to fly across the world tomorrow and never think of you again. You're leaving for Geneva, then Marrakesh, then Singapore again, he said. There's a conference I was invited to be the keynote speaker at. You're the keynote? He asked, stunned. I smiled. They don't ask ex-girlfriends. They ask chairwomen. He lowered his head. Leah, I know it's too late, but if there's anything I can do. There is, I said, stepping toward the door. You can check out tomorrow. Quietly, and never come back. The morning after Ethan dropped the pregnancy bomb, I woke up before sunrise. The sky outside was still purple, fading into that soft orange that comes right before daybreak. I stood barefoot on my balcony, wrapped in a silk robe, watching the ocean blink into light. The tide rolled in quietly, unaware of the wreckage it mirrored. I didn't feel pain or anger or anything that had weight. Instead, I felt empty in the best possible way. The kind of empty that means room is finally being made for something new. I packed lightly. A few outfits, my laptop, the black heels I wore at the shareholder meeting. I left behind everything else. Things that still smelled like memories or belonged to a version of me I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't notify the staff about my departure until I was halfway to the airport. I sent Taika a voice message. "Don't worry, I've approved next month's budget. You're in charge while I'm gone. Tell Anna I'm proud of her." She messaged back immediately. "Leaving for good?" I replied, "Just for peace." My destination was the private island I used to joke about going to when things got too loud in my life. I never actually believed I'd go, but now it was waiting for me like an open page. The jet touched down mid-morning. A jeep picked me up from the airstrip and drove me along a quiet, tree-lined path that opened to a small villa perched on a cliffside. Everything was white stone and glass with softwood tones. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy. It was the opposite of everything Ethan used to like. I stepped inside and found fresh orchids on the table. A breakfast tray was on the patio. And there was a note from the manager. "Dear Madam Bennett, welcome to your sanctuary. We hope this place helps you breathe deeply again." I took a deep breath. It did. I spent the first day doing nothing. No calls, no screens, no schedule. I just let the silence stretch across the hours like a soft blanket. That night, I stood on the balcony. The stars spread above like a scattered promise. I thought of my mother's voice once telling me, "One day you'll learn that love doesn't always come in grand moments. Sometimes it's in choosing yourself over someone who makes you feel small." She had been right. By the third day, I finally opened my email again. There were dozens of unread messages, corporate updates, media requests, a few speaking invitations, and tucked quietly in between, one name I hadn't expected. Jameson Wu, editor of Modern Impact magazine. Subject line, "Would you be open to telling your story?" He wrote that he'd heard whispers about a young executive who had quietly donated a luxury honeymoon package to a military couple and then disappeared from the spotlight. He wanted to feature the invisible woman behind the world's most luxurious experience. I closed the email and smiled. I wasn't invisible anymore. 2 weeks later, the article was published. The Woman Who Vanished with Grace. Subtitle, How a Forgotten Girlfriend Became the Hospitality World's Quiet Revolution. The piece didn't mention Ethan. It didn't mention Mia, but it mentioned the trip, the sudden disappearance, the professional rise, the quiet power, and it went viral. Not for scandal, but for strength. That's when Ethan came back. Not physically, but digitally. He tried everything. Emails, blocked numbers, anonymous comments on posts. Each one more desperate than the last. "Please, Leah. You don't know how much I've changed. I'm not even with her anymore. I still have the ring. I saw the article. You looked beautiful." I ignored them all except the last one. To that one, I replied, "I wasn't trying to look beautiful. I was just being myself. Something you never appreciated when I was yours." Then I blocked him for good. The next day, I received flowers from a sender marked as anonymous. Inside was a note. "I hope you're still watching the stars." I threw the flowers away. By the time I returned to the resort, things had changed. Anna had been promoted. Taika had installed a new training system. Guest satisfaction was at an all-time high. More importantly, my name was no longer whispered behind doors or mentioned with caution. I had become a symbol, not of heartbreak, but of power. One afternoon, as I walked through the garden, a guest approached me. A woman in her 40s, soft smile, sun hat in hand. "You're the one who gave my daughter and her husband their honeymoon," she said gently. I nodded. She didn't tell me until after. Said she didn't want to make a fuss, but I wanted to thank you. You gave them more than a trip. You gave them a memory they'll carry forever. I didn't know what to say. I just placed my hand over my heart and smiled. She added, "It's rare to see someone use pain to grow instead of destroy." That night, I cried for the first time since leaving Ethan. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't. 3 days after I returned to the resort, a formal invitation arrived from the International Hospitality Awards Committee. I had been nominated for Excellence in Quiet Leadership, a title that felt oddly perfect. The awards were being held in Paris at the same hotel chain where my parents had started their careers decades ago. It was a full-circle moment I hadn't expected to come so soon. But when I read the list of confirmed speakers and saw the audience list, executives, press, industry giants, I felt calm. I was ready. This time I wasn't representing someone else's success. I was standing there as myself. I sent my RSVP that afternoon. By evening, news had spread among the corporate circles. My phone buzzed nonstop with congratulatory messages, calls, and requests for interviews. And buried between them was another name, Mia. Her message was simple. I think we need to talk before Paris. Woman to woman. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. 2 days later, she showed up at the resort uninvited. Taika found her at the front gate wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf as if disguises could change history. She says it's personal, Taika said, looking uncomfortable. Wants to speak to you alone. I sighed. Bring her to the staff tea room. Not the garden, not the lounge, and definitely not anywhere guests can see her. The tea room was modest. Bare wood, a few plants, clean cushions, nothing fancy. It was the only room in the resort where I allowed myself to be ordinary. Mia looked nervous when she walked in. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing dark circles and slightly puffy eyes. Her expression was not smug or performative this time. It was tired. Thanks for agreeing, she said softly. I didn't, I replied, sitting down. But you're here anyway. She gave a weak smile, still sharp. I guess I deserved that. I didn't answer. I waited. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her bracelet. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I blinked slowly. For stealing my vacation or for stealing the man I built it for? Her shoulders fell. Both. All of it. I wasn't supposed to fall for him again. I swear. When he invited me, I thought maybe he just wanted closure. And then he said the trip was a gift from him, that he planned it. My jaw clenched, but I stayed quiet. He made it sound like he had finally moved on from you, she continued. He even told me you were busy chasing corporate fame and didn't care about romance anymore. I believed him. You always believed what you wanted, I said, my tone even. Mia didn't argue. I didn't come here to be forgiven. I just wanted you to hear it from me. He's not with me anymore. We're not together. That's between you and him. I said, leaning back. Why bring it to me? Because he's been calling you again. And he keeps saying he wants to make things right. That he still loves you. I raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, he told you that while you were still together. She nodded. Yes, he used to text you when I was asleep. I saw them. He doesn't know. I knew. That did not surprise me. But it still left a bitter taste in my mouth. I wanted to warn you, she added, because you might still have feelings. Don't finish that sentence, I said sharply. You don't get to tell me what I feel. She nodded quickly. Sorry. A silence fell between us. Then she added very quietly, I found out I'm not pregnant. It was a false alarm. I didn't lie on purpose. I really thought I was. I narrowed my eyes. Did he? No, she said. He still doesn't know. I didn't want to tell him until I was sure. But now I won't. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt. Mia, I hope you heal truly, but I'm not your confidant. I'm not your therapist. I'm not part of your mess anymore. She looked up at me with red eyes. So that's it. You just close the book and walk away. No, I said gently. I read the last page and I moved on to a better story. She didn't follow me out and I didn't look back. On the flight to Paris, I wore my quietest power. A long black coat, gold-accented heels, no makeup except a berry-tinted lip. My suitcase was small. My eyes focused. The venue was stunning. Glass chandeliers, velvet carpet, everything built to impress. But as I walked the halls, I realized I wasn't intimidated. I belonged here. My speech was scheduled near the end of the gala. By the time I stepped on stage, the room had grown quiet. They expected to see a polished executive with boardroom language. Instead, they got me. I'm not going to speak about metrics today, I began, or about profits or logistics. I want to talk about something most business schools don't teach. The strength of disappearing. Heads tilted, pens paused. Sometimes, I said, you don't need to fight loudly to win. Sometimes walking away from something toxic is the loudest power move you'll ever make. I saw nods in the crowd. I planned a vacation once, a beautiful one. Personalized menus, private chefs, custom views, but I didn't go. Someone else did. And for a while, I thought I had lost something. A hush settled. But now I know. I didn't lose a trip. I lost a weight I was never meant to carry. And in return, I found myself. The applause was soft at first, then louder and louder. By the time I walked off stage, I knew something had shifted. Not just for them, but for me. Later that night, I stood on the rooftop bar overlooking Paris. The city lights below shimmered like 1,000 tiny hopes. And somewhere in that moment, I let it all go. Every doubt, every betrayal, every ghost that still whispered I wasn't enough. I raised a glass to no one in particular. To the woman I used to be, I whispered, and then with a small smile, to the woman I became when she finally stopped waiting for someone to choose her. When I flew back home after the awards in Paris, I expected peace, a soft landing, quiet mornings with jasmine tea and ocean breezes. Instead, I was met at the airport by someone I hadn't seen in years, Ethan's mother. She stood near the arrivals gate in a conservative coat, holding a small paper bag and a hesitant look. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with silver. Her eyes, the same ones Ethan used to have, watched me with something between hope and guilt. I could have walked past, pretended I didn't see her, but I paused. She approached cautiously. "Leo, I know I have no right, but I needed to speak to you." I stayed still. She offered the bag. "It's nothing big, just your favorite walnut cookies. I remembered you used to eat them when you were stressed." The scent reached me faintly. Sweet, warm, familiar. "I can't stay long," I said, taking it politely. She nodded. "That's fair." I didn't invite her to sit, but she stayed anyway. "I heard about Paris," she said softly. "Congratulations. The article was beautiful. Your speech was stronger than anything I've ever seen." I thanked her. She paused, searching my face. "You've changed." "I had to," I replied. Another pause. "He's not doing well," she said. "I'm not saying that to guilt you. I'm just worried." I didn't speak. She continued. "He quit his job, sold his condo, tried to launch some half-baked startup, burned through his savings. I think he thought he'd impress you." I raised an eyebrow. "And if he had," she lowered her head, "he thought success would fix what he broke. But I keep telling him what he broke wasn't just a relationship. It was trust. And you can't build trust back with logos and pitch decks." I almost smiled. She hesitated again. "He doesn't know I'm here and I won't tell him, but I needed you to know. I regret not protecting you more. You were never just the girlfriend. You were family." Something in my chest twisted. Not from pain, but recognition. The mother-daughter bond that had once felt real. The Sunday lunches. The inside jokes. The way she used to pat my hand whenever Ethan acted selfish. "You did what mothers do," I said quietly. "You protected your son." Her eyes welled. "And I lost a daughter." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. "This isn't from Ethan. It's from me." I don't expect a reply, but it's all the things I should have said before. I took it. She stepped back slowly, eyes still glassy. "You don't have to forgive him or me, but I hope. I hope you find someone who never makes you question your worth again." Then she turned and walked away. I stood still for a long time after that, the bag of cookies warm in my hands. That night, I didn't open the envelope. Instead, I took a long bath, lit a lavender candle, and scrolled through pictures from Paris. One photo caught my attention, taken by someone else clearly. I was laughing mid-sentence, my head tilted back. Not posed, just real. I saved it to my favorites. Then I opened my inbox. Among the congratulations and corporate requests, there was a message flagged as internal. It was from our Singapore properties PR director. Met a consultant today for the green energy audit. He asked if you were related to the Leah Bennett who gave that Paris speech. Turns out he saw it live. He asked if it would be inappropriate to send flowers. I told him, you appreciate honesty more than flattery. Hope that's still true. Attached was a name, Dr. Ryan K. No last name, no message, just that. I smiled. A week later, I flew to Singapore for a site inspection. I wasn't looking for anything. Romance wasn't on my to-do list, but I still wore my nicest flats and picked a blouse that made my eyes stand out. Professional, yes, but open. Ryan was tall, quiet, and easy to talk to. He didn't compliment my looks. He complimented my operational structure. The way you handled interdepartmental morale was elegant and tactical, he said. Elegant and tactical, I repeated with a small laugh. That's the first time I've been called both. He smiled. You make strength look graceful. Not many people do. We talked for 20 minutes longer than we needed to. About travel, about culture, about things that didn't need fixing. He didn't ask about my past. I didn't ask about his. It felt like two adults meeting each other exactly where they were, without expectation or pressure. Before he left, he handed me a folded card with a personal number inside. If you ever want to talk about sustainability or just need a recommendation for rooftop jazz spots, he said with a crooked smile. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. I just tucked the card into my notebook next to my passport. Back at the resort, life returned to a quiet rhythm: emails, meetings, walks by the beach. One morning, Anna knocked on my door. There's a new family checking in, she said. And the wife is 8 months pregnant. She's a nurse. He's in the military. I nodded. Put them in the executive suite, sunset view, and the dinner, private table, oceanfront. She smiled. Already done. Somewhere in another version of this story, I might have been the woman at 8 months with a man who didn't deserve to be a father in a life I would have regretted forever. But that wasn't my story anymore. Mine was filled with rebuilt peace, quiet power, and the kind of joy that doesn't need to be posted online to be real. It had been almost 2 months since Ethan's last message. I hadn't heard from him. Mia had gone silent, too. The gossip faded. The posts stopped. It was like they had both evaporated from my timeline and from my life until I walked into the conference center ballroom in Geneva and saw him sitting in the back row. At first, I thought it was someone who looked like him. The same dark jacket, same slouched shoulders, but when our eyes met just for a second, I knew it was him. He wasn't supposed to be there. The event was invitation only. He wasn't in the hospitality field and his name wasn't on the list of approved guests. But somehow he was there. And worse, he waited until the QA session to stand up and speak. Not ask a question, not offer insight, but speak. Leah, he said into the microphone, ignoring the formalities. I know this isn't the time or the place, but I need you to hear this. The room shifted. Heads turned. Whispers fluttered like moths. I held my expression perfectly still. Ethan's voice cracked. I lost you. I know that. I've tried everything to be someone worth standing beside, but nothing I do matters if I can't apologize publicly for everything I ruined. Someone in the front row tried to hush him. An organizer motioned for a security guard to approach, but I raised my hand. Let him finish, I said. Gasps rippled softly. Ethan looked both relieved and terrified. I took something beautiful, he said, voice shaking. And I gave it to someone who didn't even value it. I lied. I cheated. I disrespected the best thing I ever had. And it took losing you to realize I never deserved you in the first place. He turned toward the audience. Now you're looking at the most composed, brilliant woman in this room. But what you don't see is the woman I knew who used to stay up late organizing charity drives, who left handwritten notes for staff at cafes she liked, who thought planning a trip for someone was the purest form of love. His voice broke and I destroyed that silence. Heavy boo. He looked at me again. I know you'll never come back. I just wanted to say it to everyone that I'm sorry. He handed the mic back and sat down. The moderator looked at me, clearly uncertain how to proceed. I stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just calm. I didn't ask for that, I said to the room, my voice even. But I'll accept it. Not because it changes anything, but because acknowledging pain can sometimes be the final step in leaving it behind. Soft applause began. Not for him, for me. I glanced at Ethan. His eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. But it didn't matter anymore. Later, as the crowd thinned and guests mingled, I felt a quiet presence behind me. Thank you, Ethan said, for not humiliating me. I turned, sipping my wine. You did that all by yourself. He half smiled. Still sharp. Still learning, I replied. He studied me. You're really done, aren't you? I was done the day I stopped needing answers. He nodded. Mia's moved back home. I think she's teaching yoga now. I raised a brow. Sounds peaceful. It is, but it's not you, he said. I didn't reply. He added, I saw your interview last week. The one where they called you hospitality's quiet force. You looked like a woman who no longer waits for permission to take up space. That's because I am, I said simply. He took a step back. Goodbye, Leah. This time he didn't try to hug me. He didn't ask for another chance. He just walked away without turning back. That I appreciated. The next day I gave a keynote speech in a full hall of decision-makers, innovators, and CEOs. This time, no interruptions. I spoke of rebuilding, of respect, of how leadership isn't about being loud, but being present, being consistent, and being whole. They stood when I finished, but I didn't feel proud because of the applause. I felt proud because for once I didn't see a single face in the crowd that I was trying to prove something to. Not Ethan, not Mia, not anyone. I was finally just myself, and that was enough. On the flight back home, I found Ryan's card still tucked in my notebook, the one he gave me in Singapore. I hadn't called. I hadn't needed to, but something about the silence felt unfinished. So, I texted, still offering rooftop jazz spots? The reply came minutes later, only for award-winning chairwomen. I smiled. I didn't know what this was going to be. I wasn't rushing into anything. But this time, it felt different. There was no drama, no tests, no noise. This is peace.